The palace of King David was filled with many sons, each carrying ambition, pride, and strength. Yet among them was one daughter, Tamar, a hidden jewel in the house of Israel. She was not just the king's child, but the only daughter of royal blood, wrapped in garments that spoke of purity. Before we embark on this captivating journey, we would love your support. Hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others, and turn on notifications to stay updated on our latest stories. Her robes, richly embroidered, marked her as a princess of the highest honor. They also made her a target of envy, attention, and secret desire. The palace echoed with the steps of men, plotting wars and strategies. Yet Tamar's laughter brought a softer melody. She was a gentle reminder of peace in a household plagued by rivalry. David's sons were many, their personalities fierce, their ambitions restless. Tamar, however, bore the gentle dignity of her mother, a reflection of purity untouched by corruption. She walked the royal courts with a calm spirit, drawing admiration from those who saw her. But admiration is a double-edged sword, for it can turn into obsession. Her innocence became both her crown and her weakness. Those who looked upon her did not always see her soul, only her beauty. Behind palace walls, whispers followed her steps. Some whispered of her kindness, others of her unmatched beauty, but a few whispered with darker intent. Tamar belonged to a world where her brothers measured each other by strength, but her value was in her gentleness, and that gentleness left her vulnerable. In a house where David's sons were trained for battle and leadership, Tamar had no weapons but her innocence. And innocence in a world of ambition was a fragile shield. David loved his daughter, yet his attention was often drawn away by the burdens of kingship. The weight of a crown blinded him to the storm quietly gathering under his own roof. Tamar trusted her family, believing safety was her inheritance. She could not imagine danger would come from within, not from those who shared her blood. She often moved through the palace gardens where flowers bent toward her as though recognizing one of their own. Her presence seemed too pure for the intrigue of royal life. But while she walked in peace, eyes watched her in silence. Desire and jealousy were already being birthed in the shadows. The sons of David knew rivalry well, each craving the throne that only one could inherit. Yet within that rivalry grew another hunger, darker and more destructive. Amnon, the firstborn, was supposed to protect his sister. Instead, he allowed his thoughts to wander where no brother's thoughts should ever go. Whispers began spreading through the palace corridors, whispers no one dared confront. They told of Amnon's restless heart and the dangerous fire kindled within him. Jonadab, his cunning cousin, noticed the change in Amnon's eyes. With devilish wisdom, he began feeding the flames, shaping them into a plan. Tamar was unaware of these poisonous seeds taking root. She continued her life, unaware that her kindness was being twisted into a weapon against her. Her beauty, once a blessing, became a silent curse. The very things that made her admired made her a target. The palace was not a safe haven for the innocent. It was a battlefield where even family ties could be broken by desire. David's kingdom was vast, but his house was filled with fractures. And Tamar, the hidden jewel, was about to be caught in the cracks. The irony was cruel. She who carried no ambition would become the spark that revealed the corruption within the royal household. Her life was meant to reflect purity, yet her story would expose the darkest corners of human weakness. The tragedy of her fate would echo for generations. The day came when whispers became dangerous silence. Tamar's vulnerability stood naked before the storm no one warned her about. Every smile she offered carried no suspicion. Every step she took carried her closer to danger waiting in the shadows. She could not see the web tightening around her. Each thread was spun by jealousy, rivalry, and forbidden desire. The palace where she should have been safe became the stage of betrayal. The people she trusted most would fail her when she needed them most. Her royal robes symbolized honor and dignity, but they also marked her as a prize that someone was willing to take by force. The hidden jewel of David's house would not remain hidden for long. Soon, her innocence would collide with the corruption of men's hearts. Tamar's story began in beauty, but its foundation was laid in the cracks of silence. And silence in David's house was about to birth devastation. Amnon, the firstborn son of King David, carried the pride of being heir to the throne. Yet beneath the honor of his position, a forbidden desire began to eat away at his soul. His eyes, once filled with the arrogance of a prince, now burned with obsession for his own sister. Tamar's beauty, meant to inspire admiration, had become a trap for his corrupted heart. The palace whispered about Amnon's strange restlessness. His face grew pale, his appetite faded, and his strength seemed to slip away as desire hollowed him from within. He could not sleep, for Tamar's image haunted his nights. He could not eat, for her presence consumed his hunger and replaced it with longing. This was no ordinary attraction. It was poison coursing through his veins. He knew it was forbidden, yet the more he resisted, the more it grew. Desire unchecked becomes dangerous, and Amnon's thoughts twisted into fantasies of possession. He did not see Tamar as his sister, but as something he must have at any cost. It was then that Jonadab, his cousin, noticed his turmoil. Jonadab was not known for wisdom, but for cunning, always searching for schemes and opportunities. He asked Amnon why he looked so weak, why the son of a king should waste away. With sly persistence, he dug into the hidden secret Amnon tried to bury. Finally, Amnon confessed the dark truth. He was in love with Tamar. The words hung heavy in the air, dripping with shame and danger. Jonadab did not rebuke him, nor did he call his desire evil. Instead, he fed the fire with a plan that was as wicked as it was clever. He suggested Amnon pretend to be sick and request Tamar to bring food to his chamber. The scheme was simple, but beneath it lay a trap of destruction. Amnon's weakness became Jonadab's opportunity to manipulate. What Amnon could not control, Jonadab was eager to weaponize. The seed of deception was planted, and Amnon embraced it with desperate hope. What should have been resisted became a plan of action cloaked in secrecy. Soon Amnon lay upon his bed, feigning sickness with convincing groans. His servants whispered of his condition, carrying news quickly to King David. The king, worried for his firstborn, sent to ask what might ease his illness. Amnon answered carefully, choosing his words with calculated precision. He requested Tamar, his sister, to come and prepare food before him. His voice trembled, but his excuse was wrapped in false innocence. David, unaware of the darkness beneath his son's request, agreed. He sent word to Tamar, asking her to care for her brother. Tamar, pure in heart and eager to serve, obeyed without suspicion. She carried the duties of a sister with no thought of betrayal. Her hands prepared the food with gentle care. She entered Amnon's chamber with kindness, believing she was walking into an act of mercy. The chamber was dimly lit, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Amnon's eyes followed her every move, hungry and restless. She kneaded the dough and baked bread while he watched in silence. What she offered in love was received in lust. Amnon's heart pounded as he saw her innocence displayed in simple service. Every gesture she made drew him deeper into his obsession. When the food was ready, she placed it before him with a soft smile. Her act of kindness was genuine, untouched by suspicion. But Amnon refused to eat in the presence of others. He commanded the servants to leave, cloaking his intent with the pretense of privacy. Tamar remained, unaware she had stepped into a carefully woven snare. The silence of the room grew louder with every heartbeat. Amnon asked her to bring the food into his chamber, into the inner room. His voice carried urgency, but Tamar did not recognize the danger. She obeyed, carrying the dish closer, trusting her brother's request. But with each step, she walked deeper into the jaws of betrayal. The trap Jonadab had whispered was now fully set. Tamar stood at the center, surrounded by the shadow of a desire she could not see. Her innocence met Amnon's corruption in that chamber, and the line between love and violation, between family and betrayal, was about to be shattered. The palace outside remained busy, unaware of what was unfolding. But in that private room, a storm was about to break that would scar the house of David forever. Tamar's trust carried her into her brother's chamber, but betrayal waited on the other side. What began as a gesture of care would end as a cry of devastation. Tamar stepped into Amnon's inner chamber, the dish of food in her hands. Her eyes carried only concern, her heart heavy with the desire to comfort her sick brother. The air was thick and unsettling, though she could not name why. Amnon's gaze lingered on her in a way that made the room feel smaller, darker. She placed the food before him, urging him gently to eat. Her voice was tender, unaware it was speaking into the silence of a predator's lair. Amnon's hands trembled, not from sickness, but from desire. His hunger was not for bread, but for the sister who stood before him. He pushed the food aside, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Come, Tamar," he said. "Feed me with your own hands." His request was unusual, but Tamar, innocent in thought, agreed. She lifted the food and moved closer, believing kindness was all he wanted. Then, in an instant, his hand seized hers with a grip that shocked her. His eyes burned with a fire that revealed the truth she had never imagined. Fear flashed across her face as her mind caught up to the danger. The chamber was empty, the door closed, and the brother she trusted no longer seemed safe. "Come lie with me, my sister," Amnon demanded, his voice thick with urgency. The words struck her like a sword, piercing through her innocence. Tamar staggered back, dropping the food in disbelief. Her lips parted with a cry of horror, but Amnon's grip held her fast. She pleaded with him, her voice breaking with desperation. "No, my brother, do not force me, for such a thing should never be done in Israel." Her courage shone through her fear as she tried to appeal to his reason. "Do not commit this disgraceful act, for it will bring shame on us both." She reminded him of the law, of honor, of the destruction that would follow. She begged him to consider his soul, his future, his name. Her voice carried both wisdom and love, trying to pull him back from the edge of his madness. But Amnon's ears were deaf to reason, drowned by desire. She even offered another way, desperate to delay the unthinkable. "Speak to the king. He will not withhold me from you," she said, clinging to hope. Her words were not consent, but a last attempt to escape. She prayed he would seize the chance to stop before ruin consumed them both. But Amnon's lust was stronger than her pleas. His heart had been hardened by obsession, and his mind was blinded by sin. He silenced her cries with force, overpowering her fragile frame. The struggle echoed in the chamber, a clash between innocence and corruption. Her tears fell as her voice broke into sobs of agony. The sister who came to serve was betrayed by the brother who chose violence. The act was done, and silence filled the room once more. But it was not the silence of peace, it was the silence of devastation. Tamar lay shattered, her soul broken in ways words could not contain. The robe of honor she wore had been stained with grief and dishonor. Her trust had been stolen, her dignity crushed under the weight of betrayal. The jewel of David's house was now cracked beyond repair. Amnon, who had once been consumed with longing, now looked upon her with contempt. What he had craved became what he despised in an instant. The twisted cruelty of sin turned desire into hatred. He cast her away with bitterness, as though she were the cause of his shame. Tamar, trembling and heartbroken, pleaded once more, "Do not send me away, for this wrong is greater than what you have already done to me." Her words fell on stone, for Amnon had no compassion left. His heart was hardened, and his actions sealed her fate. He called for his servant, commanding Tamar to be cast out. The brother she trusted became the executioner of her dignity. The servant led her away, while Tamar's cries echoed down the halls. She tore her royal robe, a symbol of purity now soaked in sorrow. Ashes fell upon her head as she wept aloud. The palace heard her grief, but no voice came to defend her. The day everything shattered was not only Tamar's tragedy. It was the unveiling of corruption within David's household, a wound that would never heal. The daughter, clothed in beauty, was stripped of innocence, and in her silence history would remember the day a kingdom's purity was betrayed by its own blood. Tamar stumbled out of Amnon's chamber, her body trembling and her spirit crushed. The air that once carried her innocence now felt heavy with disgrace. Her hands gripped the edges of her royal robe, the symbol of her purity and honor. With one desperate motion, she tore it apart, a cry of anguish woven into the fabric. Ashes were poured upon her head, her way of mourning the death of her dignity. Her voice rose in sorrow, echoing through the palace halls with haunting clarity. The servants paused, stunned by the sight of the princess undone. The jewel of David's house was no longer clothed in beauty, but in grief. Her cries were not quiet sobs hidden in secrecy. They were loud, raw, and unashamed, demanding that the world witness her devastation. Every step she took was marked by trembling. Every cry pierced the silence of those who dared not interfere. Her shame was not her fault, yet it clung to her like a chain. Her tears fell not for sin, but for the injustice forced upon her. David's palace, a place of songs and victories, was now filled with the lament of his daughter. The halls that once celebrated triumph now echoed with her mourning. Those who heard her wept in silence, but no one moved to restore her dignity. Fear of the king's household and shame of scandal froze them in place. Tamar's grief was public, yet justice was absent. She carried her wound alone, though the whole kingdom should have risen in her defense. The question loomed like a shadow. Where was David, her father, the mighty king? Where was the shepherd who fought lions to protect his flock? David was told of what had happened, and his anger burned within him. But his anger, though fierce, never turned into action. The silence of the king thundered louder than Tamar's cries. His failure to act became a second betrayal, piercing deeper than the first. He who conquered giants could not confront the sin in his own house. His crown weighed heavier than his duty as a father. Tamar, left abandoned, walked into the desolate chambers of grief. Her innocence stolen, her voice unheard, her soul shattered. She lived as a symbol of brokenness, clothed no longer in robes of honor, but in the ashes of sorrow. The laughter that once filled her days was silenced. Her loneliness was a punishment she did not deserve. Her rejection was the fruit of a culture that hid shame instead of healing it. The palace chose silence, hoping the memory of her cries would fade. But every stone, every hallway carried the echo of her heartbreak. The society of her time gave no space for her restoration. Instead, they buried her story beneath the pride of kings and the ambitions of men. Her brothers watched, each with bitterness in their hearts. Absalom, in particular, held his fury like a sword hidden beneath his cloak. He comforted Tamar, taking her into his house. Yet even his comfort was heavy, filled with quiet plotting of vengeance. Tamar's days became shadows, her joy locked away. She lived desolate, a princess erased from the songs of Israel. Her beauty, once praised, was now marked by sorrow. Her name became a whisper of tragedy, instead of a hymn of honor. The silence of David wounded her more than Amnon's violence. For what is a father if not a defender of his children? The mighty king sat upon his throne while his daughter sat in ashes. The shepherd of Israel failed the lamb within his own fold. Her pain was buried beneath politics, alliances, and appearances. But no matter how much they tried to silence her, Tamar's grief could not be erased. Her story lived in the bitterness of her brothers, in the vengeance that would one day spill blood. Her tears watered the seeds of rebellion that would shake the kingdom. She was the forgotten jewel, hidden away in sorrow. Yet her suffering carried weight that history could not ignore. The ruin of Tamar was the ruin of David's household. From her ashes rose division, bloodshed, and rebellion. Her life was not lost, but her spirit was scarred beyond repair, and the silence of those who should have spoken became the loudest crime of all. Tamar's cries still echo across the ages. They ask us whether silence in the face of injustice is not itself a form of betrayal. Absalom watched his sister Tamar sit in ashes, her royal robe torn, her eyes emptied of light. His heart, though outwardly calm, burned with a fire no water could quench. Every time he saw her silent grief, anger tightened in his chest like a clenched fist. His love for Tamar became a vow for vengeance against the brother who had destroyed her. He said nothing, for silence became his weapon. Words would only alert his enemies, but patience would sharpen his blade. Amnon walked freely through the palace, as though nothing had happened. But Absalom's eyes followed him, cold and calculating, biding their time. 2 years passed like the slow dripping of poison. Each day added weight to the burden of vengeance pressing on Absalom's soul. Tamar remained desolate in his house, a living reminder of injustice. Her pain became the fuel that kept his anger alive. Absalom never spoke of his plan, but his heart was already decided. Justice delayed was not justice denied in his mind, it was justice sharpened. David's silence widened the wound. If the king would not act, then Absalom would rise as executioner. His smile remained, his words polite, but behind them was a storm. None could see the fire that smoldered beneath his composed face. At last, the time for patience ended, and the time for action began. Absalom devised a plan that would appear like celebration, but conceal blood. He invited all the king's sons to a great banquet in Baal Hazor. The invitation was clothed in festivity, but the heart of it was murder. David hesitated at first, reluctant for his sons to gather in one place. But Absalom's persistence convinced him, and the feast was approved. The brothers gathered unaware of the trap. Laughter and wine filled the air, but beneath the music was death waiting. Absalom gave instructions to his servants in hushed tones. "When Amnon's heart is merry with wine, then strike him down," he commanded. The servants listened with wide eyes, their loyalty bound to Absalom's will. They knew they were about to carry out vengeance, dressed as justice. Amnon arrived, confident and careless, drinking deeply as though tomorrow would never come. His laughter filled the room, a cruel contrast to Tamar's cries. Absalom watched him closely, every sip of wine pushing him closer to judgment. His silence was colder than the steel waiting to be drawn. At the appointed time, Absalom's voice rang out with chilling authority. "Strike Amnon," he ordered, and the room froze in shock. The servants lunged forward, swords flashing in the light of the banquet. Amnon's laughter turned into a scream, cut short by steel and blood. The other sons scattered in terror, their feasting turned into chaos. What began as a celebration became a scene of death and dread. Amnon fell. his lifeblood spilling on the floor. The heir of David was no more, slain by his own brother's hand. Absalom stood over him, eyes unflinching, his vengeance complete. The silence he carried for 2 years broke in the sound of Amnon's death. The brothers fled on horseback, carrying the news back to Jerusalem. Panic spread through the kingdom as rumors of slaughter reached the king. David wept when he heard, mourning not only Amnon's death, but the unraveling of his house. His silence had birthed bloodshed that now stained his throne. Absalom fled, knowing his father's wrath would soon burn against him. He sought refuge in Geshur, far from the reach of David's justice. Tamar's pain had not vanished. It had only been avenged with blood. Her sorrow became the spark that ignited a war within the family. The household of David was fractured, trust shattered, unity lost. What began with one act of sin now spread like wildfire through the kingdom. Absalom's vengeance seemed righteous in his own eyes, but it left scars that would not heal. For in seeking justice he planted the seeds of rebellion. David's house, once united in song and victory, became divided in grief and suspicion. Blood had been answered with blood, and the curse of silence grew deeper. Tamar's tears had not been wiped away, but multiplied through the sorrow of many. Her story, buried in pain, now echoed through the corridors of power. The day of the bloody banquet became a turning point in Israel's history. From Tamar's brokenness rose a feud that would tear David's house apart. Tamar remained in Absalom's house, her once bright life reduced to shadows. The princess who had walked with dignity now lived in quiet desolation. Her days no longer carried the music of laughter. They carried silence, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the echo of her own grief. The royal robe that once marked her purity lay in tatters. She never wore it again, for the symbol of her honor had been torn from her forever. The palace where she should have been cherished became a place of whispers and avoidance. People looked away, pretending her story had been erased. She was the daughter of a king, yet no one restored her crown. She was the sister of princes, yet no one defended her name. Her beauty, once praised in every corner of Jerusalem, was now hidden behind closed doors. Her innocence, once her glory, became her sorrow. The irony was cruel. Tamar, who embodied purity, was left forgotten, while her violator walked in freedom until vengeance claimed him. She lived in Absalom's house, but even his love could not heal her wounds. Vengeance for her pain had been taken, yet her heart remained broken. She did not seek blood. She had only sought justice. Yet justice never came, and her name slipped into silence. History wrote long chapters about David, his sons, and their wars. But Tamar's story was a single wound buried between their pages. The girl who was once a princess became a shadow in the margins. Her life ended in obscurity, unremembered by the songs of Israel. Her pain did not vanish with time. It lived on, carried quietly in the cracks of a kingdom that pretended nothing had happened. David's silence had allowed sin to fester. That silence would soon grow into rebellion, tearing apart his throne and his legacy. Amnon's crime led to Absalom's vengeance. Absalom's vengeance led to exile, and exile led to rebellion against his father. The spark was Tamar's pain, yet she was not even named in the wars that followed. Her suffering was the root, though others reaped its bitter fruit. The kingdom bled because a daughter's cry was ignored. The nation fractured because justice was buried beneath royal pride. Absalom rose against his father, shaking the very foundations of Israel. The rebellion was born from the silence after Tamar's cry. Blood flowed on the battlefield, but the first blood had been Tamar's tears. Her ashes had prophesied the ashes of war to come. The tragedy was more than personal, it was national. One woman's brokenness revealed the fragility of a kingdom. If David had defended Tamar, perhaps history would have been different, but his silence cursed his house with division. Tamar's story is one of the most haunting ironies in Scripture. The girl meant to be cherished as a jewel was discarded like shattered glass. Her life was not recorded in triumphs or victories. It was recorded in sorrow, a monument of injustice. The people forgot her, but God did not. Her cries are written in His Word, eternal proof that her story mattered. Though history erased her from the throne room, her pain echoes in every corner of Scripture. She is the reminder of innocence betrayed and justice denied. Tamar was the daughter history tried to forget, but forgetting her does not erase her cry. Her story warns every generation about the cost of silence. Her tragedy asks us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many voices have been silenced because no one dared to speak? Tamar's ashes symbolize more than personal grief. They symbolize the ruins left when power covers up truth. Her pain was not wasted, for it revealed the corruption in David's household. It exposed the cracks that no crown could hide. The kingdom of Israel carried scars that began in her chamber of betrayal. The wars and bloodshed were echoes of her unanswered cry. The hidden jewel became the shattered stone. Yet her story still glimmers as a warning against ignoring the wounded. Tamar's voice may have been silenced in her time, but across the ages, her sorrow still speaks, reminding us of the cost of inaction. Her cry still echoes, a lament carried through Scripture. It is the voice of innocence lost, justice delayed, and silence that destroyed a kingdom. If this moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. That's the only way you can help us. Keep telling the truth that saves.